Yeah.
You know, I like popular culture. And also you get this surprise all the time because you don't know how people are looking at that, but they're looking at it.
Yeah, yeah.
The thing is, you can't make any money doing that, so you always have to make your money off live gigs.
Yeah.
My thing, physically, with my skin, with my bones, with my body, with my whole life, and do it. Then I make money. But my real work is happening in a way I don't make money.
Yeah.
You know,
That is in these connections with the crowd that you call it.
Studio. Yeah. These people just looking on this space, because I love that space. That's a really open space. When you do the crowds, I'm going to, okay, China or then maybe Slovenia, and those producers are going to gather that crowd, and they're going to do that with a focus group situation. And in some cases, it's the opera house crowd, the snobby crowd, who are going to applaud and like it no matter what because of how much they paid.
Yeah.
And they've decided the government must know. The government must know, so it's good. And then you get that other crowd that's like, that's a cool crowd, because they don't know if they like it, because they didn't have to pay so much, but they get to decide, you know. But the YouTube crowd and the new crowd on the internet, what I like about them is they can boo. Nobody boos in the theater anymore, and I love booing. I love booing. I think booing is where it's at. You know, if a crowd can boo, then they know where they're at, and they can do that in the internet.
Yeah, but what is interesting is also how it has developed a tolerance of normally recognizing things that it will be rejected in the theater, you know, but they are interesting to watch and interesting to connect through the internet. You know, it gives that place of whatever things that we can call, oh, that's crap, but.
Well, what happens in the theater right now in the live situation is that somebody who gets themselves, something's going on that's right now very kind of difficult to explain, but very clear. It's a very clear thing, but it's very difficult to explain, of how we're gathering people around situations to watch and making them believe that we're educating them. And in fact, what we're doing is we're just giving them crap. And actually what we should be doing is letting them educate us, because they paid the money, so we should be getting educated. And someone like the Koreans would understand this, but you know, Europe, the Germans, the French, well, they'll never understand that they have to let the public speak. Don't try to educate the public. And that is a really interesting thing. But then, again, if you listen so profoundly to public in that way, you can lose your own train of thought. And so you want to keep your train of thought. And what's great about the internet is when I put something up, the train of thought connects or it doesn't. And then you get to see your numbers. And you start seeing like, oh, that many people connected. And some other people might write to you, and they will write to you, which is like, boo, which you don't get in the theater, which I'd like to get in the theaters, boo. They get this like, what a bunch of shit, what a bunch of wankers. You get stuff like that, and I like that.
That's great.
I want someone to tell me I'm a wanker, you know, because then I know, okay, there's a group of people who see that as wank. I mean, this is somebody who's been keeping up with my daughter with, you know, the whole Strictly Come Dancing thing. We've kept up. We really have kept up with the English version of it. Bit the Dutch, but mostly the English. And I've been watching the way that publics are happy to vote for celebrities to learn to dance. Isn't that cool? I think that's such a good movement for dance, though, isn't it? That people want to see people get better at it. I just think it's great. And of course, it's like a newscaster, or it's like, you know, somebody who's on a soap opera like EastEnders, or, you know, whatever. But still, everyone, what they get thrilled about is watching them learn to dance. And I just think that's really exciting.
Yeah, and of course, you know, the celebrity stuff, but, you know, I think.
Celebrity is another discussion, but still, it's healthy that they want to see them learn to dance. That's do you want more coffee? It's wonderful. You can be a pop artist and not be able to sing because we can tweak you. But if you can't dance, it's clear. The camera tells all. And I love that. And right now, I think Britney Spears is a great dancer, and The Last Dance with a Broken Heel was one of her masterpieces, and we'll see that in the end. But, I mean, wow.
Yeah.
This bitch can dance, you know. And she probably can't sing, but she can dance.
Yeah.
And I think that's something in the pop music I admire right now a lot.
Yeah.
And I've watched it grow. And, yeah, I think public have a right to vote for that. And that's what's happening in Strictly and all these other kind of programs that I like a lot. And I miss that in my profession. No one gets to vote. Because there's a group of people, a panel, who give me a bunch of money to go do some wanko thing. And it doesn't matter now because they already gave me the money and they voted. And there was like 10 of them. And then I go in front of Publix, and because those people voted, they're not going to boo. Because that's their tax-paying money. They're just going to, accept the fact that I'm a wanker. Because, well, dramaturgy. You're now in Europe. Dramatic French philosophy. We're in the middle of it here, and we know what the public is thinking and what it means. We know.
I love that tone. Say it again.
And we do know. It's like that's what we deal with here, and I get really sick of it, but that's what we're dealing with, and that's who's on your panels, and that's the mainstay.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah, everything.
And we're going to show them. And what I saw, quotes and articles, it doesn't matter to me with the public if they love it or not. It's just that it's some people willing to accept me. I mean, what a fucked up thing for an artist to say. I don't want to be accepted. I want to be understood. I don't want to be accepted. I just want to be understood. And if I'm not understood, I want to be told. Because then I want to work on it. I'm Katie Dye.
And where are we right now?
In my house, and this is my very dirty dish towel.
In a very clean and spacious house right now.
But this contains more problems about dirtiness than anything in your whole household. Apparently, this has more germs and...
The dirty towel.
Exactly. I have a whole drawer. This is where towels go once they go through that stage. This is the stage of towels here. And then... Well, eventually they go here because, in fact, you mustn't let your towels become at this stage, which is really kind of almost at that point where they cause damage to the client. Well, right now my work is at a kind of funny point because I think I got involved in a work that did hit its peak already in about 2000. Magpie Music Dance Company. That was a really good work. Before that, I had done a work with Grupo that I thought hit its peak in about 1984. Very good piece of work. And then I hit a break point at Dartington, and then I went on with Magpie. In about 2000, from 1991 to 2000, it hit its peak. And now I'm at a point where I decided not to let it go, even though it hit its peak, and start to organize it as a history to give to younger people. So there's a load of younger people now who are using the name Magpie as an umbrella name for them to do projects. So it's the first time that I didn't take an artistic project, which I loved very much. It was a lovely project. And when it hit its peak, just sort of abandon it and leave it because, it's over. Instead, I decided to take the residue of it, probably because of the times I live in, and the age I'm at, and offer it to young people and say, use the name, use the history, use the idea of it, and just fucking make it what you will. And that's what's happening right now in my artistic work. Well, Magpie came out of a group of dancers who were intent to recreate what was already happening in the postmodern dance world about making choreography in real time. And we found ourselves confronted with either Bill Forsyth and the ballet's confrontation with that, or even further back, Merce Cunningham and Cage confrontation with that, and then the contact dance confrontation with that. So we decided to reinvent it through the way we could. And what we wanted to make was choreography in real time. And we did that through the traditions of the Amsterdam music world, which was clever and allowed us then to experiment within live music and dance in a way that let us probably make something really comprehensible, more comprehensible, I think, with what had happened before it with improvised dance, so that people couldn't tell it was choreographed or improvised.
That is the best definition of what is the best improvisation. Is that one that you can
You don't know. We hit that peak about 2000. It took about 5 years to reach that peak. But once we'd hit it, actually, there was a kind of like, well, Why don't we choreograph it if it looks choreographed? You know, those questions came up, you know. But finally, we then went against some of the rules we'd set up for ourselves within that situation to make it look like it's choreographed, and started to make what we thought were even more interesting performances because they became so emotionally. We started to tap into what could emotionally happening under those circumstances that we hadn't done before. And then it hit a real peak at that point. It hit a real peak. And what's interesting is it's in my age group. And I left the United States by the time I was 25. And I didn't go back until I was 35. And so I really left a big period. But I lived in New York, I lived in Salt Lake, born in California, worked in San Francisco and New York a lot, and then ended up in Europe by 25 and stayed. And I stayed because I got a lot of work. So my influences were quite different. Then when I went back to New York by 92, 93, and met people my age, and what they'd come up with is these kind of methodologies. It seemed as if somehow in the lifestyle of being an artist as an American, they had not been given permission to like eliminate themselves, which I had given myself permission to in my kind of nomadic lifestyle, to eliminate myself quite a few times, you know. So I created my solo pieces and my life with that and Carlos Traffic and Emmy, you know, different Italian directors. And I eliminated that life and started Gruppo. I eliminated that life. I started Magpie. You know, I could just eliminate myself. So I wasn't looking at methodology. I was looking at a continuum. I would come up with methodologies as soon as they were being repeated. I would call them methodologies and go, yeah. You know, and not looking for the Katie Duck technique, not looking for that. But when I went to New York, I found all these methodologies, and they seemed to be encompassed in the term improvisation, and they seemed to me also to look at the word improvisation as solution. And I found that really not interesting because if you're in the live performing situation, there's no solution. The live performing situation has no solution. So all of my interactions so far in New York have put me in a position where I'm dealing with someone who's come up with a solution, who when I go on stage with them, I completely abolish. You know, I just destroy, and then they get mad at me, and then probably should have created more choreographies in their early career. I don't know, with Gruppo, that's all I did. I made choreographies that looked improvised, but they were actually set, and I called them choreographies. They were. And then in a kind of another world, I was working with musicians I was improvising and getting paid well by musicians' terms, which is a better pay than dance. And I would improvise because that's what they were paying me for. So I didn't have methodology. I just had a good paycheck and did my job. And I think that it became a thing to improvise in New York, or it became a term, a kind of commercial term in a strange way, but I mean non-commercial commercial term, like you can do in America. And in my case, it was more somebody asked me to do it, and so I figured out how to do it. And otherwise, I was making very set work, which for most people, they'd say, how'd you make that? It looked improvised. Because I have a phobia about when you see my work, I don't want you to know how I made it. I don't want you to see my hands on it. I tweaked a lot my work. So when I did the reverse with Magpie, it wasn't about improvisation really. It was about, I made work which all my feedback from public was, it looked so improvised, was to make work that was improvised look so set. That was my only motivation. And there were other motivations about sexuality and gender that I wanted to promote that did come out in the final peak of Magpie, I think very strong. But I just wanted to work with that structural implication. And also because you're getting involved at that time, I was, with the internet and how live it was in a real way, in a real-time way. And also that ability with remote and choice. And I wanted to be able to put in a live audience situation a sensorial situation with artists where they would actually do what the public wanted them to do. just like you were on camera or something, you know, like you were.
Well, it's like kind of very strong awareness that you are performing. And
awareness became a big study in it because you needed to be able to deal with that live music that was going on, which wasn't always favorable in my count. I was always like, some of that I don't like. But also dealing with where are the public at any given situation. And inside choreography structures, that was never available, you know.
Yeah.
So now you had to get really good dancers. You did. You had to get really good dancers. That was the first key thing. Gather the really good people.
Yeah.
And make the good chemistry that makes that happen. And Magpie hit a peak around 2000. That was with a group that was really showing that thing that I had in mind. Interesting enough, once I showed that, the question was, okay, now you've made a piece that no one would know it was improvised. It looks choreographed. It looks like the music score was made for it. It was, you know, everything is, the dramaturgy is real. Nothing goes against anything unpolitical correct for me, blah, blah, blah. And yet I would wonder then, why the fuck don't you choreograph it then? What, are you lazy? What the fuck? You know? And realize too that in a way, it would cost a lot more money to make it this way because it took years for people to be able to do that. Really, it did. It took a lot of process to get good at that. And yet it cost a lot of money to make it as a choreography. So where's the economy balance in that? I was really getting curious about the economy balance.
well, like perhaps it's in the method. You know, that perhaps that magpie and you...
I couldn't hone in on one methodology that made that reasonable in that particular collective of magpie that I thought peaked.
Yeah, like, but also it's a process in time that you have that there's a simulation of skills and understanding
It's super provincial.
Yeah.
It's absolutely provincial. It's friendship, it's understanding, it's continuum, it's years, it's that kind of thing. And those years cost a lot of money.
Yeah, process.
Yeah, in art time, that cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, and yet at the same time, you could make that promise with public that as much as it seems like it's a choreography, we will never do it again. This is your choreography.
Yeah.
And we will never make it for anyone else again. That was a really nice promise to run on for a while.
For what?
At that level, if that can be a message. And certainly that's why it peaked, because we began to question that. And then we began to destroy the craft. And we took it to the OT because of that. Dance on cement, put it in really difficult situations and see how it falls fucking apart. And then we hit a point where it was like really over. It was, you know? And everybody individually went off into many interesting perspectives in their work because of that experience. But under different domestic situations and so forth, I ended up, such as, what she says in Miss Caroline, such as, I ended up realizing I was going to have to stay here. That was all. I just had to stay here because of situations. And therefore, I decided to make Magpie into a kind of umbrella. I hit that point at Darlington when I was doing research on my own work. I hit that point where I discovered the internet. And the internet had a lot to do, the discovery of the internet had a lot to do with why I would want to do Magpie. And so I didn't ever see a difference between the space that the internet was creating and the work I was going to do now. And so for me it was a technology. And it is a technology in the body work as well. That's a technology. And it is a technology in light and in the whole design of it, everything that happens. But most of all, I think because of that space that opened up to us. And even if you go into the theater live, you know that the internet exists. And so you never now will come to a theater live without knowing that. And so if it's not aware of the internet existing as it's being a performance, I think it's just an archive piece. And I see mostly still money going into archive pieces that don't seem at all aware that we live in another world. But we love to mantelpiece work. We love that.
So you relate a lot with your work. You use a lot of word of communication, but in communication you always extend to, from technologies to the fact that humans communicate.
I think that over the last well, 10 years, but it really intensely the last 5 years. Brain studies has become an interesting area, neurology. It's interesting because also someone like that, you know, there's a lot of different movie stars into that right now because they get into their kids. They're really rich and they have time to get into their kids and realize they better study the brain. But I'm more interested in that about public, that how their brain works, and then I get interested in how that relates to what's happening in technology. There's so much phobia about, well, when I was a kid, television came, bad for you, and then telephones, and then, you know, mobile phones, and then just the whole, you know, I'm 56 now, so that means that I've watched and stayed in tune with the progression. I took one fast from media from 1990, I think from 1980 till 1986, I took a real fast. Mm-hmm. And I had to catch up with Madonna because she happened then. But still, I took a fast. I didn't watch any television, didn't watch any news, didn't watch nothing. Didn't read newspapers, nothing. But when I went back into media, I got interested again, as I think I always has, with the way that the brain is. It's evolving with technology. It's not being oppressed. It's not that anything's bad for you. It's all evolving. The mobile phone is making us all schizophrenics. Yay! We're all schizophrenic. Yay!
Or we are realizing that we're always being schizophrenic.
And clearly the first person on the telephone went, hello! They yelled at it, not because they needed to, but because they didn't think no one would hear them. You know, and we're evolving in that way. Our imaginations that we're talking to someone, we're evolving in so many different ways in our brains because of what's happening in technology, and our publics are. And so the idea that we're supposed to educate our publics when they're going through that makes me crazy as an artist, because I know that what I need to do is educate what it is they sensually need from me as a dancer. What do they need, you know, from me as a dancer or performer? What do they need to heal, to be okay to be here, to pay their money to be here? What do they need from me? And that improvisation umbrella term allows you to keep yourself alert, to be responsible for that as an artist when you go out on stage. Yeah, like you're very kind of like a musician in a way. I really have heard that responsibility only from musicians, and you're one of the few dance artists that says that you actually have a responsibility if you're improvising, you know, in a certain way. Maybe because a lot of the role models I have are musicians, like Derek Bailey. In 1980, when I went to Japan, I stayed with Kazuazo Ono and his studio, and now he's really old. I mean, that was younger. He was younger. He had his son there, and he talked this way. So I mean, you know, he's a role model for me. I mean, you know, I know plenty of dancers who talk this way, at least in my history, who are my role models besides musicians. So.
That part.
I think it's really simple, but then someone might, through methodologies, confront it as a solution they have to make, and that's but there's no solution. You are in front of people, you are being judged. That's the way the world works. That's the way the brain works. People have come to sit down and judge you, and that's a cool thing. Now, if you get them through that click into activity, fantastic. But if you don't, they're just going to judge you. That's what they do, and to get over that moment is really important in performing.
And in the training of the performers,
Well, I think that we never get over that. I think we're always like dealing with the fact that we're being judged. And I think that's such a stupid point to be. I don't think you should be at that point. You should be at the point where you know you're being judged and you're just now doing it. That's it. You're doing it because you're being judged. Admit it. You're the dummy. You're the one getting yourself in that situation. You know you're being judged. Of course you are. But that resistance seems to be continually a trip and dance, like, you know, oh my God, I think I'm love. You know, there's this nervousness backstage that's really an interesting thing. You know, Magpie completely, that was one of the things we worked on, not just the gig, the backstage. We would no longer do that backstage. We would no longer let ourselves do that. We conditioned ourselves through what we did in the backstage to make sure that when we went on stage, we were no longer in that frame of mind where, oh, they're going to judge us, oh God, no one was there. No baby shit here. Of course they're going to judge you. That's what you're doing.
And that's your job.
That's your job. You choose. You made that decision. You're here. Take responsibility. End of story. Be more Buddhist about it. Fuck you. And that really worked.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah. And what are if we can distill some principles of that experience with Magpie about, that is something that I always found interesting in your work. It's like how in your classes practically are these advanced essays of human behavior and interaction. What did you found that is fundamental just to teach, or from those years in Magpie about real-time composition?
Well, I think the thing I just said, that, first of all, you have to take responsibility for the position you put yourself in, to be judged, and then get over that. And then second of all is to take on some of the more traditional ideas about shamanism, that you're a performer, and therefore you do have a job to do with health. There's something related to health in your job. And then to allow yourself to express what it is, not just that you're living in your life. And this is a kind of Oprah Winfrey problem in the performance art scene, if you ask me. If you ask me, and you are, so, the empathy, the brain activity of empathy, which we have, is so high that we actually can pull ourselves into the beings of other people and really feel what they're feeling. We can feel with other people, we can do it. But instead, we relate to our memories of what we feel about something as to be something that we're feeling for someone else. Yeah. So Oprah will say, I know exactly how you feel about that rape because I was raped. What about if you weren't raped and you still felt what somebody felt? There's a social worker idea about mental health that way as well, where you can't get too involved because then you can't resist, you can't really get on, in this job. Well, I think you should feel everything that person's going through, and you should probably try to understand it a bit deeper so that you really know how not to reject their implications as they begin to act. And I think empathy is something that we lack in the world right now. And of course we do. We look at the news and we're not supposed to feel it. There's so much of it. We're getting so much activity all the time, stuff that's really tough to look at, and we're not supposed to feel it. I figure it'd be okay if you felt it all. You can handle it. Your brain can handle feeling it all. Look at the news, feel it all, and then have dinner. It's okay. You can feel like that and have dinner and have a bath. You live in the bourgeois Western thing. You really can't afford it to feel it. So we've kind of alienated an empathy level, and we've started to work with a kind of Freudian idea of, if I went through that, therefore I can experience what you're going through. That is really a low level of empathy. That's all you do when you perform, is you feel people, you feel them. And when you feel them, you can relate to some of the feelings that you've had in life and all that. But those are the most low brain things you're doing. Yeah.
So in a certain way, it is a very interesting, the empathy then becomes the action in itself.
Empathy is the action.
It's the action.
It's what you're feeling.
Yeah.
Everything you're feeling is what you should be doing. If it's done, the piece, it should be done. They know. The public knows it's finished.
Yeah.
And they hate that it's finished because it's a kind of death. Yeah. Every time a theater piece in live action happens, you see these kind of pieces that are on screen, but we have a very different context with our world going on, which is why I like making my YouTubes and my website pieces, because then I know the death of them is it's okay because I'm home. But when you're in a theater and you've gone all the way there and you've got this live activity, and the next thing you're going to do is maybe go have a drink or whatever, it's a really interesting thing, the death of a piece. The ending of a piece is a really interesting thing. And you need to go through that death with your public. You've got to acknowledge that we went through this together and now it's over. Yeah. And every time we're preparing ourselves for that moment, we're going to die. Because we're all going to die. We're all going to die. And that's what I love about theater. It always dies. It always reminds you that you're going to die one day. Hello. Isn't that cool?
So, in a certain way, that is...
Or are you going to do that when you die? You'll be willing to start again?
Well, that is,
That's a way of approaching.
a way of
that.
approaching. Because in certain way, you have this. We have the ideas of beginnings and endings, entrances and exits, and perhaps all are big metaphors.
Mostly, I think we live our life with the idea of transitions.
Yeah.
This has been brought into the composition world of choreography. Not so much music, but choreography, because music is it's a bigger history. Composition doesn't allow us that. Thank you. But still, choreography as a young art form allows us transitions. There are no transitions in life.
Yeah.
There are no transitions. Hello. You're not going to band-aid it together because you made a mistake. You should just alleviate that. Eliminate from any. There are no transitions.
Because there is no points to reach.
No. You're just going to go or not.
Yeah.
People stick with you or they don't. And not everyone is going to stick with you in a live event. Not everyone's going to stick with you. And if you're aware of that and you hear that as a buzz in the room.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to acknowledge it. Acknowledge it, because that's like actually every time you're acknowledging something like that, you're acknowledging you're alive. And you're acknowledging that person's alive. You're acknowledging the whole thing is alive. The wonder of live theater, again, is this thing where it just ends. I love that. I love it. Because everybody goes, oh, God, at the end. Or they go, wait. I love that. And then they realize that they've got to go get a drink now. And they've been through something. It's a bit like fucking, a good fuck. Every time you have a good fuck and you have an orgasm, it's like dying. It's fantastic, isn't it? It's fantastic.
They're kind of this really good, moment but at the same time it's kind of lost,
And in time, it's so short.
Yeah.
Even though we can go long,
Yeah.
it's short. Give me a break. The most you can do is what?
Yeah.
10 minutes?
That's great.
That's Tantra. So, it's always in time.
Yeah.
It's always in time.
I always
Death
remember.
is reminded to us all the time. The ending of it is always reminded. I love that in theater. I love exit in theater. I love exit in theater. It's just a constant reminder of that.
Yeah.